Hi everyone. I'm Anya. Nice to meet you. I'm recently joining Matrix Fire as the Southeast Asia ambassador and key leader. Today I will be your moderator. So let's start with why don't you guys introduce yourself to us? Tell us more about yourself. Start with John.
Hello, I'm John Linden, CEO of Mythical Games. You want more information?
Yes.
Just names. Been in the gaming industry for a very long time. I was originally a studio head at Activision Blizzard on a game called Call of Duty, so made Call of Duty for many years. And then had a mobile game company called Seismic Games, so made a game. Our biggest game there was a game called Marvel Strike Force. It was a top 25 game for about 5 years. Sold that to Niantic, and then started Mythical in 2018. So.
Cool. I'm Miguel. I'm the chief of staff at Star Atlas. We're building an MMORPG on Solana. I've been there for about 2.5 years. And yeah, excited to be here today.
I am Jason Brink. I am the founder of LFG Incorporated. We advise gaming projects and Web2 and Web3 projects as they build out their ecosystems, specifically in relation to tokenomics and DePIN. And the reason I'm on this panel is because for the last 4 years, I've been the president of blockchain of Gala Games, which I left about 6 months ago.
All right, that's great. So we have all the people in Web3 gaming here. So let's start with, so we always talk about like how Web3 gaming is so good, it's different from Web2 gaming. So I want to know, in your point of view, is a part of the play to earn or the blockchain technology, what makes the difference between Web2 and Web3 gaming?
Yeah, we're going in order. So we've had a couple games now with Web3 economies. We really focus a lot more on Web2 audiences for our games. So we're a little bit different than other games out there. We found a lot of really amazing pieces. One is that even back in the days when we were doing Call of Duty, a lot of people express themselves through digital identity, right? Skins, things like that. And it really becomes a big part of who they are. And I think what's been most fascinating, and frankly, I think a lot of games and game developers are getting it kind of wrong right now, is that they always say, oh, it's about profiting and you can make money on your assets. And I do think there's part of that. But also what we've seen is that a lot of it is about expressing that digital identity. And so, for example, in NFL, you have the ability to trade these players, right? And a lot of the highest priced items are ones that we never sold, right? You have to earn them in the game. And so if I got a Travis Kelce card, it might sell for $800, $900 because we're more Web2. We're not selling $200,000 assets. But it might be $800 or $900, and what we see is we don't see people rushing out to necessarily sell it and profit for $800 to $900. What we do see, though, is people talk about their collection value went up, their identity went up. And so having this concept of letting consumers price it and having an open economy that is actually priced by the consumers has a really, really powerful effect. And so there's a dozen other things we've done too, but I'd say that's the one that's really stood out for us at least.
Yeah, and that's the digital ownership. I think for us as well, as we put a lot of the game architecture on chain, also breaking away from that Web2 model of like a one-directional relationship or a bi-directional relationship between studio and consumer almost. The player is a consumer. Putting game logic on chain, putting assets on chain allows for composability, which allows for the building to actually be done by a community, by the players as well as yourself. And I think that changes completely the paradigm in gaming. If the game isn't just about the game studio anymore, it's about the whole community, that means that more experiences will develop led by the community and what they want, which creates kind of this virtuous cycle which brings a whole new level of value to blockchain gaming that Web2 gaming just doesn't have.
Yeah, I fully agree with all the points that you guys said there. I feel that here next to John, I'm not going to have shit to say about gaming because his experiences are so much deeper than mine, and yeah. Anyway, but when it comes to Web3 gaming, for a really, really long time, it has been bullshit. Honestly, it's been really bad. It's been really, really rough out there, and every single person in this room has seen a dozen games, maybe one or two of which were made by the company I used to work for, that you've been like, wow, we could have done this differently, or these things could have been done in a better way. And I think that's in large part due to the fact that for a long time, Web3 gaming has been driven not by game development or by game players, but by looking at Web3 items and NFTs and tokens and stuff as an asset class as opposed to a thing that improves gaming. Now, the good news is that it doesn't have to be that way, and we're seeing much better gaming experiences begin to sort of rise from the ashes of the last bear market, where games like what Star Atlas is working on are coming up, and you're seeing things and you're like, oh yeah, that looks like an actual game. That is actually fun. It's not just a bullshit experience. On the flip side of that, though, we also have Telegram tappers, so that's fun, I guess. But there is hope for the future. But we need to work together as an industry to hold a. Did I just call you out? I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. But I'm sorry. I'll give you a hug later, man. I there's a place for everything. Okay. But yeah, that's what I think.
Yes, I truly agree. I think we are trying to build like the very good quality and fun gameplay for the player to come to play our game, just more than just like tapping game or something like that. So talking about Web3 gaming, we are always mentioned that. Okay, we are always mentioned that we have to bring mass adoption to Web3 gaming. That's how the Web3 gaming can be continued. So do you think what is the biggest barrier of bringing mass adoption to Web3 gaming? Is it like regulation? Is it technology or what?
I think personally it's we've been delivering experiences as an industry that doesn't align with what gamers actually trade, if that makes sense. So if you think about it, like a majority, if you're looking at mainstream gaming, right, not necessarily Web3, it's a very interesting niche of within the broader gaming industry. But if you look at the gaming industry, they're traditionally not crypto traders. They're traditionally not financial traders. They're consumers. They think in terms of liquidity. I've never seen a World of Warcraft game. I mean, maybe there's one game I'll see if you guys can guess what the game is, but there's one game I think that actually does line up kind of with what Web3's been doing. But they don't think in terms of bids and ask and floor prices and collection values. They think in terms of two panels. If you look at any MMO out there, there's two panels. This is what I want, and this is what I'll give you. And I think that it's a different mindset. That's what they're looking for, and we're delivering them spreadsheets, And I think that's one of the challenges. And one thing we've seen that directly now to where we do have an NFT marketplace kind of built in the game, and you can buy with a credit card, you can buy with crypto, great. But what we added is this concept we had created called Quick Trade. And so what you can do now is I can actually trade for that asset. And basically what we're doing, and this has become a very powerful use of Web3 for us and as the game developer, is that if I wanted Patrick Mahomes on my team, I could buy him for $400, but I can also trade for him. And what we have is now we have this massive fintech system behind the scenes, and about any given time we have about 50,000 bids and asks in this marketplace for this one game. And what can happen now is we can price that in real time. We know exactly what the money-backed bids are right this second. And when I put that on the left side, instead of buying it, I could trade for it. And on the right side, it's all the assets I do have. We can also real-time price those. And basically, I can now start checking off the ones I don't want, and it totals them up in real time. And if I end up with $400 on both left and right panel, I can do a cashless transaction. And when I do that, I receive that asset, and I got rid of my other 4 assets, and it was for free, for me as a player. And what really happened behind the scenes is we real-time bought Patrick Mahomes from one seller in real time in one atomic transaction, and we real-time sold those other 4 NFTs to 4 different buyers. So we actually got paid 5 transaction fees on a cashless transaction. So what we were able to do is use the power of Web3 and mix these cohorts together and create an experience that are familiar to gamers and one they actually wanted to participate in. And what it's really done for our game is last year in season 1, before we had this feature, about 80% of our revenue came from traditional gaming, right? In-app purchases, packs of cards, things like that, and 20% from secondary. But now we're seeing nearly 70% of our revenue in year 2 is coming from Web3 because we were able to relate how gamers think and how they want to play and how they want to trade with a model that's actually backed by Web3, and it's been remarkable. So we're really excited about that, and I think that's where we have to do. You have to deliver something gamers want. Sorry for the long answer there.
I mean, I think the biggest thing when it comes to onboarding, the biggest barrier to mass adoption is the fact that we continue to think of ourselves as Web3. Now, I don't mean Web3 in terms of an ethos or Web3 in terms of ownership or Web3 in terms of you know, the way that stuff actually works, but Web3 in terms of definition. Because when you stand there and you say like, oh, okay, how are we going to get people into Web3? And you knock on the door and say, hey, can I interest you in some Web3? You're not going to get any sort of adoption. The way that you get adoption is by building stuff that has no friction, right? I mean, back in the early days, when you look at like the expansion and growth of like the TCP/IP protocol, right? Now, nobody today goes and plays a game and thinks, you know what I need to do? I need to work about, you know, make sure that I get my TCP/IP set up correct before I try to connect to the LAN party and make sure that we have the right subnet mask. And, you know, you don't do that. You just go click play. Now, TCP/IP still is the protocol that underlies almost all internet communication and almost all gaming communication, but nobody knows about it. No gamer today, like if you ping the average gamer and you ask them about that, they're not going to have the slightest idea. And I think that that's the point that we have to get to when we talk about Web3 gaming, where people are participating in Web3 gaming and they're participating in ownership, but they're doing so without the pain of adoption that we currently have, and without the sort of ivory tower intellectualism, I think, that our space is unfortunately kind of known for. I mean, because you get a lot of really, really smart people talking about really, really smart people things, and no offense to gamers, there's a lot of really, really smart gamers out there. No. You know what I mean, though. But like, if you want to play a game, right? You don't want it to necessarily be an intellectual experience. You want to play a game. It's about dopamine hits. It's about having fun. That's the whole point of the game, right? You know, you play a sniper game not so you can do physics, but so you can shoot things, right? You know, I mean, that's what it boils down to. And you know, once we have to get that sort of ivory tower nature out and open the door to all gamers so that they can come in and have fun. Have you played RPGs? I play the hell out of RPGs. No, there's tons of things. It's not that there's no thinking. It's that it's that you don't play the game for the thinking. You play the game for the experience. You play an RPG, right, for the emotional attachment that you build to a character, right? That's what it's about. It's not the intellectualism behind it, right? I mean. Yeah, but the guy was so smart with Mexican stats, just defending the game as the ability. I know. I'm not trying to say gamers are dumb. That's not the point. Gamers are not dumb.
Some are, but...
Okay, now you did it. Now you did it. It's you.
Okay,
hey, someone. He just said gamers are dumb. Did you guys hear that? Did you hear it?
Headline tomorrow. No, but...
Shit's going to be on Twitter, man. You know how this goes.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I think I agree with you guys. Make a game that can't be ignored, basically, and then it doesn't really matter. And Web3 is just... as you say, it's just a part of the tech stack which provides a bunch of benefits, which is actually what is valued by the people, right? I will say, though, that also in the current paradigm of Web3, a lot of the time the users are different. You don't need that mass adoption if a user is worth 10 times, 20 times what it is in Web2, right? So if you are going for a game that relies more on the economics and kind of a more financial mindset, the type of players that you attract a lot of the time will have a much higher value than in Web 2. And so actually, if you think of a freemium model and you have 5,000 users and there's a retention rate of 5%, you know, that's actually equivalent to hundreds of thousands or millions of users in a freemium model in terms of the economics of the game and the structure of the economy. So yeah, make a game that can't be ignored, and even if the onboarding isn't 100% there, I think that people will overcome it in order to play it.
Yes. Also, like when we talking about onboarding the gamer, so most of the time the game project will always do some collaboration with the gaming guild. So do you think that's still important in this nowadays to do the collaboration with the gaming guild, do the airdrop campaign, or you just focus on the real gameplay?
I mean, not for us. We don't. We just launch a game as a game, you know. And You know, I mean, it's tough though. I mean, honestly, I don't want to kid anybody, especially if you're making a game in the room. It's not an easy business to do. It's very hard to make a game. It's even harder to ship a game, and it's really hard to have a game that actually can be sustained. And then even in the Web 2 world, about 90+% will fail. And a lot of times you fail for a lot of different reasons, right? So it's hard to predict. But I do think you do have to have a great game. I do think there's certain, you guys have done a great job at building that community. I think it's been really amazing. So I do think it depends on what you're building, right? So we go more after the more traditional mainstream audience and really layer in experiences that make sense for that game, you know? I do think, though, there's some interesting concepts that will start coming out of it. I think the idea of guilds, not necessarily gaming guilds, because I think traditionally gaming guilds are after money. You know, they're still very financially driven. Guilds are generally not financially driven. They're driven by friendships and strategy and things like that to come together. And I think the idea, though, a lot of times, you know, we had this in Call of Duty, right? We had a clan system in Call of Duty, and it was one of the biggest drivers of long-term engagement. So it's a very, very important part of the ecosystem to get people into these groups. And I do think things like the concept, I don't think anybody's really done this well yet, but the concept of having a DAO around your guild structure, I think that's actually really fascinating. It's different than gaming guilds, but I think there's some great concepts there to where you are joining something and you can see transparently what you're joining, right? Like, you know this better than anybody in terms of the subgroups that come out of that and how much money's spent behind them. But everyone has a little bit different strategy, and I think there are going to be great things that come out of that. But I still think you kind of hit it before, and it's one of my favorite things I've thought about before is like, people ask all the time mainstream, right? Web3 gaming hits mainstream when we no longer call it Web3, when it's just gaming.
Fucking A.
And when it's just a game that has new economies, right? That's, to me, what it is. It's not about airdrops. There'll be games that airdrops make sense. There'll be games that building the community makes sense. There'll be games where, you know, that is what your goal is, and that should be your goal. But at the end of the day, it's a video game, right? And you should use that to whatever makes sense for your world, you know? So.
Yeah, I agree. And what you've said about DAOs is exactly how we think of them in Star Atlas, because we see the value of building with the community. Yeah. You know, guilds, and we call them DACs, decentralized autonomous corporations, cool. And we provide a platform for DACs to register on chain. In the future, we'll have like a shared treasury. It will have a DAO incorporated in the DAC that will allow for voting and for taking on-chain action, and impact votes in the game as well. But this comes from this idea that our game is to be built with the community. And so if we can facilitate the organization of the community into groups that are pursuing an objective within the ecosystem, which is what we see now. We've got groups who say they want to build ships from mining to the ships. There are others who are more focused on media. There are others who are more focused on this, more focused on that. At the end of the day, what you're creating is organizations that go back also to the theme of identity that you were talking about. They give back to the identity of the person as well, and coordination brings development of the whole ecosystem. So I definitely think that in our case it makes sense. I wouldn't put it so much as a growth strategy when you're launching a game in our case. Again, in some cases it makes sense, but for us it's something that developed completely organically within our community. Most of our guilds are Star Atlas first. They're not Web3 gaming guilds. They were created in Star Atlas for the purpose of developing in Star Atlas, and we see them as a driving force of our ecosystem, for sure.
I mean, if I can follow up, sorry, you don't mind. To me, it's a tool in the arsenal, right, as a game developer, and that's really what it has to be. There's no formula. There's not going to be a magic, you know, or a silver bullet that's like, if I do these 4 steps, I'm going to have a successful game. That's just not how gaming works. It's a tool, right? And I think for you, like I said, what you guys have done and built the concept of community, you know, around this, that's freaking awesome. It's not going to work for every game. It works for you guys. In our case, we have a very tradable economy, and what works for us is that we are actually getting people that might not want to spend $500 on a digital asset, but they can actually play and strategize in the game of figuring out how to get. We always use the line of like trading a thimble and working your way up to the Lamborghini, right? You give them a thimble, and if they really work hard, they can trade all the way up of something of value. That makes sense for our sports games. Other games, I think, are going to be very focused around content, right? Like, I still think one of the biggest uses of Web3 in gaming will be content creators. People talk about the creator economy. And right now the creator economy is mostly Roblox and Fortnite. Well, there's a problem with that, right? At any given time, and I'm sure this is recorded, and I don't mean any disrespect, David, to the CEO of Roblox, but at any given time, he has an economy, he has a marketplace. If his shareholders say, you know what, we need a little bit more this quarter, they can unilaterally change those rules, right? They can change what that means and destroy the value for the creators. They have the power to do that. And I think true creator economy games that come out have to be done this way, because if I'm going to invest my time and effort, especially if you think about it as a multiple trillion-dollar industry eventually, you have to feel comfortable that what you're building, you're getting appropriate, kind of creation for. So it really depends on the game. I think there's hundreds of different ways you can use Web3. I think what you guys are doing in Matrix Fire is awesome. I mean, I think it's you're doing a great job on skin economies and tying that into gameplay. Every game is different. Every game up here has been different. So that's the important part, I think, to think through.
I think from my perspective, community, I'm not a big fan of airdrops. Okay, I'm not a big fan of airdrops, but that said, I think that community is one of the main things that really underlies gaming, period. I mean, back in the earliest days when I first started gaming, it was a lot of single-player games because they're just you either had a LAN party with Hot Pockets and everyone would bring their 400-pound CRT monitors into someone's basement, and that was gaming, and that was, multiplayer gaming.
Miss those days.
Dude, they were epic, right? I had an actual dolly for my CPU that I would roll around with it just strapped onto it. It was beautiful. But once multiplayer gaming actually became a thing, gaming became a part of community. Because you would play a game and even back in the days when like MUDs and stuff like that, like there was a community that underlied these things, and there was a sense of communication and sharing, and you'd help level somebody up, and gamers are some of the best people out there, just so everyone's clear, and it was just a wonderful community driven experience. Now, for Web3 is at its very core community-driven as well, because there is a sense of sort of shared belief that you have to have in whatever the project is, or it just simply isn't going to work. If nobody believes that a project is doing something, then that project dies. And this is why you see projects that crap on their communities wither, because nobody likes that, and it's not going to continue working. Web 2 gaming, you kind of have a little bit of a different experience because your funnel is a lot larger at the top, right? But with Web 3 gamers, it's so small. There's so few gamers out there that are really actively pursuing Web 3 that if you don't take care of the community, it withers and dies. And so I love what you guys are doing with your onboarding of Web 2. I think that's super, super, super critical.
I think it depends. I think we're going to see this arsenal, a tool arsenal that people, and I'll give a couple quick examples. Like the creator of Grand Theft Auto, he's working on a game with the Web3 economy. His focus is around creator economy, though. So he's creating a very specific experience, and that's why Web3 matters to him. The creator of EverQuest is working on a game right now. He's working on a persistent open world where you have to constantly kind of be involved with your community. And what's really, really cool about where we're heading right now is, and to me, it's very hard to break into the game industry your first time. So if you're kind of coming in the first time, it's tough. But what we're starting to see now is we're starting to see enough time and enough examples of what is working that now we're starting to see real large, very, very well-established game designers that are seeing this as a tool, and they're crafting what that Web3 experience is behind the scenes for what makes sense for their game. And that's when we're going to see that mass adoption, right? When, again, it's not viewed as this is a Web3 game. I'm not saying the Web3 games there's anything wrong with that. I think there's a great area of the industry that will be there for Web3. But the concept of a Web3 game built for Web3 gamers and the concept of using Web3 technology in any game experience are two very different things, I think. So.
Yes, actually, I'm so glad to be here today to talk with you guys and know about how we are thinking about our industry. So, but I'm also thinking as a builder that there's some factor missing in the Web3 gaming industry actually. So what do you want to see in the future of Web3 gaming?
Good product, good experiences. I think that we're learning. Making a good game takes time. It's super hard, as you were saying. How long has any top tier game being in development before it releases, and it's just different in Web3 because we have to develop in the open. So instead of like developing for 6 years, announcing a date 2 years out with a trailer, and then releasing the game, you kind of have, you've gone to the community from day one and you've said, hey, we're gonna build this game. This is our vision, right? And then in our case, we were still building up the studio as well. So we didn't have a studio before even as well. And so from day one, you've got these people who are invested, who believe in your vision, who want this to happen, but they're also not used to not seeing stuff happen immediately. Especially those first like 2-3 years that you're developing, it's a lot of unsexy stuff. It's a lot of stuff that maybe doesn't look as good, or it's more on the technical side, or it's still work in progress. And then there's this moment in development where you just accelerate. And I think that a lot of the games that are promising right now in Web3 are at that point where they're just going to develop a lot faster. And by the way, a lot of Web3 games develop a lot faster than some Web2 games, objectively, because they have that pressure. So that pressure is also good. But I think that this expectation, like my expectation, is that we see a lot of higher quality games, especially for the AAA, high quality, high fidelity games coming out over the next 2-3 years, just because that's how long it takes. And these are the guys who've been working on it, like us, since the beginning, or pretty much the beginning. So I think that's, and once those games start coming out, that starts to have a network effect as well, because traditional gamers who look at the products that we have today in that leverage Web3 for gaming, they'll start saying, oh no, there's actually good products coming out. Let me go and check another one. Let me go and check the other game that I saw that might be of the same or higher quality. So it's not just that your game is good and you'll attract players, is that the game next to you is good as well, and is to a level of satisfaction that kind of breaks down that barrier, and entices people to come in and try your game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think that I was just thinking of the timeline. I had dinner with one of your tokenomics guys in like mid-2020 at an event somewhere. It was some sort of fun event. But I think that the biggest thing that I look forward to people in sort of the industry understanding, or in the space, not the industry, is that timeline component. Games take a hell of a lot longer to build than people expect. And even for me, when I first got involved in things, you see a vertical slice of a game and you're like, oh, the game is done. Yeah, no, that's not actually what that means. Having people not understand that creates a lot of pain and confusion. At the same time, the initial response that a lot of game developers have is there's really two ways. You have a lot of Web3 developers who have a tendency to get, quite defensive about things, because they're like, gosh, you guys don't have any idea how hard this is. It's not just, point and click and boom, there's a game, okay? You saw a vertical slice with test assets. That's not the same as a real game. We have a lot more shit that has to happen before we can ship it. Having people do that isn't helpful. At the same time, I've seen a lot of developers get to the point where they face any amount of community pressure, and they go from being I want to be a Web3 developer to I'm actually secretly a Web2 developer and I'm not going to talk to anyone for the next 2 years. And you end up with an angry, salty community that gets really upset about things. And so the happy medium of, you guys are doing a pretty good job of this, of like being very transparent with like, hey, this is a lot bigger than you probably thought. These are all of the steps, and then be open with the community, engage with the community, and bring the community on board and into that experience with you, I think is an important part of this.
And for new studios, it's also a learning process while you're building, right? So you can have a lot of experience in the industry. It's still different to build in Web3 and to integrate that in Web3. So, and I do feel that some studios are guilty of maybe over-promising a bit on timelines, and that happens less and less, which is a good thing for the industry as well. And sometimes it isn't out of maliciousness; it's just the expectation and the not understanding of the consequences of putting out bad timelines.
Yeah, it's interesting coming from Web2 gaming, because I think I've killed more games than I've ever put out by far. Activision kills more games than you'll ever know about, right? Like they never get to the point. Games can spend years before they even get to the point of like, should we even start talking about this yet? And most of them don't make it. I think the Supercell is probably the most famous for this. I've heard they kill, I think they kill like 19 out of 20 games they make, something like that. They've only released 1 out of 20 or something of games they've made. And I do think this is going to be a challenge, and I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to use terms like rug pulls and all that just because they probably shouldn't have talked about it yet. Unless you're very, very specifically making a game driven by the community, which is not most games, you know. Even like a Call of Duty, like when people find out you're on Call of Duty, they always have these great ideas for your game, you know. And I have a kid.
Oh, you've seen Reddit too?
What's that?
You've seen Reddit too?
Well, they come up to you and they'll be like, I had a kid. He's like, I got an idea for the game. I want to have a one bomb that kills every player on every server. And I'm like, well, that's not much of a freaking game anymore, is it? If you kill everybody. But I mean, like, there is things like balance, and there's things that have to go into effect. So I do think that that's the challenge with most Web3 games. And I hate to say it, but most of them are going to fail. And that's not a bad thing. It's just how it is. You know, it's just how the industry works.
Absolutely. The balance thing is hilarious because in Web 2 games, I mean, again, referencing Call of Duty here, like you change the balance on something and you know, you nerf a shotgun and then you go into Reddit and all of a sudden
we get death threats. We actually had actual
seriously, absolutely.
Changing the rate of a joystick, hitting a joystick, and having
how dare you?
I know.
The temerity, my God.
We've had
now in Web 3 that gets compounded by the fact that you actually paid for that thing and then they changed the value of whatever it is. And holy shit, rug pull. You know what? You just made it so that my sword does like 2 point less damage against chainmail. That's it. I'm submitting a complaint to the SEC. And you know, you see shit like that, and you're like, are you serious right now? But yes, they're 100% serious. And having a community that doesn't understand balance, it's a part of a game. You have to do it or it breaks. You know, is a challenge.
Yeah, actually, I hope you'll overcome that, you know, challenge and build the base experience of gaming industry. But actually, this is gonna be the last question, so I want it to be a little bit spicy. So, what do you think is the biggest mistake in the Web3 gaming industry that we should learn?
There's a lot of them.
There have been a lot. I mean, I think that one of the biggest ones that I've seen, and I'm coming at this from a very unique level of experience. I have to say this very carefully here. So one of the things that I've seen firsthand that was very frustrating for me personally was a deeply sort of Web 2 mentality around revenue generation, not taking tokenomics into account. If you approach a Web 3 game with a tokenomic structure, with a traditional, very Web 2 mindset, you will kill the game. Because, you know, for example, let's just say you have a game that has a specific token. This token is a reward token within that game ecosystem, and people can use it to pay for things in the game, but they can also use other things, okay? One of the cool things about a system like that is you have a certain number of people that will come into the game, they'll play the game, get the token, buy the NFTs, and when other people see them buying those NFTs with the token that they've earned in game, they're like, oh shit, I better get that before they're gone, and then they will bring in their fiat or their credit card or their stable coins or whatever to buy as well. And that is part of the structure that keeps things working. And then of course, if they're buying with that token, it should be burned, right? It should not be treated like Web 2 revenue. If you don't do that, you break the game. If you do it incorrectly, you break the game. And I've seen that happen firsthand, massively frustrating. Yeah, that's one of the biggest mistakes I've seen.
I'm happy to go, yeah. I think, so if you think about the difference between Web 2 and Web 3 gaming, one of the big differences in like factors that gain importance is definitely the economy. So that needs to be top notch. We've seen early experiments go very wrong with like extractive and inflationary tokenomics. I think you need to go to a more P2P based economy that better reflects the real world, that reflects actual supply and demand in the game rather than just activity. And the second one is, you know, we're dealing with real assets now. We are not custodians in a lot of, we are not custodians, at least as our atlas of these assets, but our systems are still protecting our players' assets, and those assets are worth a lot more. And we've seen some catastrophic security issues that have happened, and that we need to be very cognizant about, because as Web3 grows, like the surface area for attack is completely new, the tech is completely new, and that's something that destroys your game from one day to the next. And it's one of those things which lay likelihood, but it will destroy you. And we've seen it happen with some of the biggest games out there. So that's something else that I'd also like to shine a light on.
Yeah, I think you guys have great points. I just say kind of a little bit of follow-up that we've all been talking about is having a purpose for why Web3, right? Again, to me, it's not like you're building on it's not a platform. As you're not building for mobile, you're not building for PC. It's not a choice like that. It's a paradigm, right? And I think you got to treat it as a paradigm. So there has to be a why. And there's a lot of whys. I think there's a ton of whys. And I think we just named a bunch of them, right? Building so the community is involved from the beginning. Building around, hey, the tokenomics is the revenue stream, not a hybrid. Building because you want some type of tradable economy. Building because you want a creator ecosystem that flourishes, right? With brands and people that can get involved and have their own experiences, right? If you don't have one of those things and you're just tacking it on, it will fail. And I think that's the mistake a lot of people are making right now, is a lot of people are just kind of tacking it on, like, oh yeah, and you can profit from your assets, right? And I don't think that's exactly right. I think there are certain cases, but I think you have to have a why, you know?
Well, I hope I will not make that mistake. So, all right, this is our panel today. Thank you so much for joining me today. Okay? Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you, guys.